empowering yourself so that you can take the steps to get out of maybe a situation that's not so financially great. Like anyone can do it. It's about, do you want to do it? And are you willing to take the time?
You're listening to the Great Reassessment Podcast. For those who have been in the Bitcoin space for a while now, my guest needs no introduction. But if you're new to this whole Bitcoin thing, let me introduce my guest. I'm honored to have Natalie Brunell on the show. Natalie is an Emmy-nominated journalist, Bitcoin educator, and host of the Coin Stories podcast. She's one of the most compelling voices in the Bitcoin space today. She's known for interviewing many of the top thinkers and telling the human side of Bitcoin. It is my privilege to speak with her today. Our conversation today will challenge what you think you know about money, media, and the future, and you won't want to miss a minute of it. It's time to reassess. Natalie Brunell, welcome to the Great Reassessment Podcast.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me.
So before we get started, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk to you about all-time highs. This last week has been crazy for Bitcoin, 111,000. I think it's tapering off a little bit now, but what is your initial reaction to $111,000 Bitcoin?
I mean, it's so incredible. We have so many tailwinds. It's really exciting to see Bitcoin sort of decouple from risk on assets given the recent market volatility. But you know what's crazy about this all-time high? I feel like the retail interest is not where it can and will be. Google searches for Bitcoin are still pretty much near all-time lows. So I feel like the mainstream narrative has really shifted more towards paying attention to AI as opposed to Bitcoin. And I think that's still coming. I think that wave of really mainstream adoption is still on the way. And that will bring Bitcoin to even higher highs. And that'll be a really exciting time.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Somebody said something at one of our meetups the other day, and maybe I'd heard it before in the past, but the supply is also dwindling down too. And in a few more years, I think there will be less than one Bitcoin where it'll be mined over the next 100 years. And so like
Yeah.
2030, 2031, there will be one Bitcoin left to be mined. And so supply is shrinking, the availability of the future supply. And so I think that's also kind of factoring into all this.
Yeah, I mean, it's these companies, the corporate treasuries are really gobbling up more Bitcoin than is being issued through the mining process. So it is crazy. I mean, when the demand increases with institutions as well as retail adoption, I mean, obviously it's going to push the price up because it's a finite, scarce asset, which will be really, really exciting. Part of me is surprised that Bitcoin hasn't hit like 150, 200,000 yet. But at the same time, things have just been so crazy on the macro side. And I think that there are still so many people who are on the sidelines, people who don't understand Bitcoin or are still not actually able to allocate to this asset class. And that's changing slowly but surely. And so there will be a wave of demand that pushes Bitcoin, I think, to a 10 trillion, then $20 trillion asset class. And yeah, we've still got a lot of upside, which is cool because people think that they're too late, but no, they're actually very early.
Yeah, that actually leads into one of my first questions I wanted to ask you is like, what do you think, what did you say to somebody who thinks they missed the boat?
Sometimes I've compared it to whether people would have thought that they were late investing in Apple after the first iPhone came out. And no, they were not late, actually. They were just jumping on the wave as the majority of people were starting to really understand that this technology is going to be in everyone's hands. And that's really where we're at with Bitcoin, too. I mean, yes, we've had some early folks do tremendously well, but the majority have not jumped in. And so that means that you are early, and being on this wave will allow you to have these massive asymmetric upside returns that no other asset class really presents you with. There is no opportunity better than Bitcoin or that has a better compound annual growth rate. So Bitcoin, I love that saying that it's becoming the new hurdle rate, because you really have to start to evaluate what, regardless of what type of your investor you are, even like the CEOs of these companies, when making financial decisions, you have to say, well, can it beat Bitcoin? And really nothing can. So yeah, no, we're absolutely very, very early. And if you think about that pool of assets, Jesse Myers always shares that awesome photo that's gone viral. And I think it's up to now like $1 quadrillion or something, as opposed to 900 trillion. And the asset classes that are so large, like equities and bonds and real estate and even gold, marching its way towards, I think, like 20 trillion. Bitcoin's just 2 trillion. So it's got a lot of room to grow. It has a lot of momentum that I think it's still going to, benefit from. And we're very early. We're very early.
Yes, I was able to speak with VJ Boyapati at a meetup one time, and he's somebody that got in pretty early into Bitcoin, and he said it never felt cheap. When you first get in, it never feels cheap,
No.
but over the long run, like maybe you actually are pretty early. But
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, when Bitcoin's a million, people will be like, "You got it at 100,000? That's incredible."
yeah. So you've had a really interesting, successful career starting in journalism, right? And transitioning into Bitcoin. Was there a moment where you thought to yourself, yep, this is where I'm supposed to be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, the Bitcoin journey was a really transformative one because I feel like like so many people, I recognized the problem. I recognized that there was this great injustice in the system that left the working class behind and I understood why people were increasingly frustrated. And I would report on a lot of these issues, what I would consider sort of the symptoms of the broken fiat system. And I would report on the growing polarization and just the difficulty of the average family being able to afford what a family once could on maybe one income. And so I think when I really learned about Bitcoin and grew in my conviction, it was that moment of just realizing that this is the best solution that we possibly have. And it can open up the door to fixing a lot of these issues and really creating a lot of abundance and opportunity that we cannot have if we continue down this path of just a manipulated monetary unit at the base layer of our economy and a form of capital that is constantly being diluted. And one group of people, in a room that none of us elected that are literally setting the price of that capital. So when I really discovered how the system worked, I felt so empowered by my knowledge of Bitcoin. That's why I feel like there's this urgency. I feel a sense of duty to teach people about Bitcoin because it has changed my life for the better and it's given me more hope for the future. That's been like the most fulfilling aspect of it is, of course, yes, financially it's really helped me feel like I can actually achieve the things I want to achieve, but more so in terms of like the hope that I have for actually all of us because even if you're at the top of the system in terms of your wealth or your power, if the whole system is crumbling under you because people feel disenfranchised and frustrated and they're all fighting amongst each other, like are you really a winner in that system? No, I would argue that it's better for people to feel like they have access and opportunity and for people to really be challenged and be able to take risks. And you can't do that if you don't have money that increases in purchasing power, which ours doesn't. It just like is this constant battle that we have in this rat race that we're in, and everyone's getting diluted and debased constantly without their say. So Bitcoin gave me hope that we can fix a lot of these issues and in turn, I think create more value for society and see more value around us.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I couldn't agree more. Your parents are from Poland, is that right?
Yeah.
And do you think that there's any parallels between starting a life from scratch and Bitcoin?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think my parents' story just really gave me just a resiliency that maybe other people who grew up maybe with everything taken care of in terms of their wants and needs didn't. I just watched my parents really struggle and I saw them sacrifice a lot really for their children and for their family. They were always wanting to be of service and to make our lives better. And every decision that they made, it wasn't really about themselves. It was about how can we create a better life for our children. And they grew up under communism where there was no sense of economic mobility and everything was decided top down from the government. So there were constant shortages and just a total botched, misallocation of resources. And so I think that they had it really, really hard and they wanted to create a better life for themselves and for their family. And Bitcoin represents that kind of self-determination and sovereignty and freedom. If you don't have freedom and if you don't have property rights, you really can't create abundance and you can't create prosperity. So I think I appreciated a lot of the principles and virtues of Bitcoin because of what my family went through and their journey. And their journey is really one that is reflective of so many here, which is they were in pursuit of the American dream. And the American dream might have the name American because it has been I think, most beautifully captured here with our rule of law and our capital markets and the opportunities that people have here, but it's really a universal dream. Like, who doesn't want to create a better future than the one that they had or that their parents had, right? And to provide for themselves and to take a chance and start a business and to be able to just really like have financial security. I feel like that's a very universal thing that America has embodied, and things have changed because the middle class has been destroyed by essentially inflation. They need a life raft, which I believe to be Bitcoin. So yeah, I'm really grateful to my parents because they really just instilled in me a sense of both hard work, but also that really anything is possible. And I think Bitcoin is very much in line with that, the proof of work, but then also the belief that you can create a better system and there is a solution.
That's yeah. My dad is from Argentina, and so I have some similar insights, just from hearing about his story, leaving Argentina, which is a country that has suffered with economic and just suffered the consequences of bad money,
Yeah.
and just how hard he had to work when he came to the United States. And man, I'm really grateful for that. And I was just there a couple years ago, and I think this was like right when Milei took over, and the dollar to Argentinian peso ratio was about 1,000 to 1, and I had to go change a couple $100 bills so I can have some spending cash when I was there, and I just had to walk around the city with like two massive bricks of cash, and it was super inconvenient because you can't just flaunt that much money. And it was just a really interesting experience. It really put into perspective how bad money can shape a society.
Yeah.
People there have to spend their money right when they get it.
Yep.
And you can buy a car and sell it for more as a store of value later. And that's what people prefer to do.
Yeah, your money's worth nothing.
Yeah. Did your parents' experiences, did they ever have, their experiences with money? Did you have any knowledge of that growing up, and how did it shape you?
Well, I definitely feel like they told me stories, but I didn't really appreciate those stories until I understood Bitcoin, right? Because I feel like we all really take for granted just money. Like we don't know what it is, we don't know where it comes from, we don't know why the supply of it actually really, really, really matters. And we're taught in school that, oh, we need a little bit of inflation or otherwise the economy stagnates and everyone hoards their money. I feel like we're just taught the wrong things. So now I actually appreciate the stories that they told me because, of course, I mean, Poland has had a history of inflation and has had a lot of issues with the currency and purchasing power as the result of a communist regime. And people essentially like weren't able to save. Like there was no way to save. You couldn't invest your money. You couldn't own property. You couldn't. I mean, my parents, for the most part, you were allocated your home by the government, and if you were able to sort of save cash on the side, you could maybe get a better place. But most people had a home allocated to them by the government. These aren't beautiful places, right? If you look at communist architecture, they're like concrete white walls and like everything looks just bland and horrible, and it's just the kind of sad. And they would wait in food lines, and my mom told me a story of how when I was young, again, I didn't appreciate this, but she would get up to the front of the line after waiting and all of a sudden everything's gone. And she recalls a story where, we were waiting at the butcher, and by the time we got to the front and it was our turn, all the meat was gone. And so my mom started to cry and I started to cry, and the lady in front of us actually shared her meat with us because she felt bad that like this is happening to people. And so that is like the life you have under communism, and people just don't have a sense of hope. They didn't have hope that things would be better, and that's why so many people wanted to flee, wanted to leave and go to the United States, but you couldn't take money with you. I mean, I wish that Bitcoin had been around because my parents could have done something to be able to save in something that they could actually, memorize 12 words or 24 words, travel to the United States and start a life. But no, like, I mean, Jan Pritzker also shares this story of growing up in the former Soviet Union. His parents could only leave with like $100 to their name, and you can't start a life with $100. I mean, people did, but it's very difficult. And so, yeah, I mean, just so many stories that I didn't fully appreciate until I was older. And Bitcoin solves for a lot of these issues that were created by government, oppressive regimes and situations where your currency purchasing power was destroyed.
It's amazing that you can sort of live at like this nexus between those two stories, where the past is not that far behind you, and they shaped you, and now we have this landscape in front of us of hope and a money that can't be corrupted in the same ways. And so that's just really cool. What do you think is one small step that somebody completely new can take stepping into this journey?
I mean, there are so many. I look back at my journey, and since then, since I started learning about Bitcoin, there are so many more resources. So if you're someone who likes to read a book, there are books. For me, it was transformative to read the Bitcoin Standard. Now I'm coming out with a book. I'm trying to reach the mainstream world, and that's going to be out in the fall, called Bitcoin is for Everyone. There are podcasts, there are short videos, there are long form videos, there are courses, there are so many different types of materials out there that help you to learn Bitcoin. I think that for people in the corporate world, we're so fortunate to have someone like Michael Saylor be so generous with his time, and he puts up every one of his PowerPoints on hope.com, and you can literally pull the slides and or listen to him give those presentations. And so there are so many ambassadors and so many people that are giving of their time and knowledge. And so there's really no excuse, to be honest with you. If like you're not learning Bitcoin, it's because you are not paying attention to it and you're not taking the time to learn about how to keep the value of your money, right? How to store the value of your money. I really love, I don't know if Michael Saylor or someone else said it first, but it's like you work so hard to earn the money, countless hours, thousands of hours to earn the money. And some people do that not even liking their job. Why not spend 100 hours learning how to keep your money? Learning how to, maximize the value of that money. And so I think that people are sometimes intimidated because they know that Bitcoin takes time, but it's the best time you'll ever spend. It will buy you back your time if you actually study Bitcoin.
Yeah, and we can stop borrowing from the future.
Yeah.
If you have a family and you want to take that into the future and in whatever way, you can stop borrowing into the future. The time on this earth is limited, right? And the time you trade for money, right? So it's storing that time. And, I haven't looked at it in a while, but just a few months ago, credit card debt was at all-time highs across the country.
Hmm.
Our national debt is at all-time high. Where do you see debt kind of going right now?
Higher.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you look at the Congressional Budget Office, they put it right there in front of all of us. They predict that the debt will be like $50 trillion. What Lynn Alden says is absolutely spot on. Nothing stops this train. When you have a system that's built on credit, you have to keep issuing that credit and you have to keep diluting the dollars. And what's interesting now is watching people talk about the idea of growing our way out of the debt. The problem is that right now, for every dollar of growth, we have about $4 of debt. So one train is moving far faster and the other one can't catch up. How are you going to manifest out of nowhere all of this growth? Because growth actually comes not from spending money, but by saving money or investing it in something productive, like capital investments. And for the most part, every single time that people even talk about growth, it really is kind of like a consumption fueled growth. Like they're encouraging the average American to spend more. They're giving tax credits for you to spend more. It's not for you to actually save your money. And it's so funny because when I was a reporter and the holidays would come around and we would have Black Friday and the shopping season for the holidays, I would come home to my mom and my mom always watched my reports. And again, this kind of goes back to her upbringing, and she's like, "Why are you guys reporting on how much people are spending? Why aren't you reporting on how much people are saving?" And I was like, that's such an interesting observation, because the way that we knew a holiday season was successful or Black Friday weekend or whatever, it's how much did Americans go out there and spend, even if it was on their credit cards. Like, that is not the sign of a healthy economy. It's like we actually should be judging it by how much people are able to save or invest in very productive things. And one of the problems that we have is, if we are going to grow our way out of it, well, a lot of the expenditures that are made to fuel growth, they don't just manifest out of nowhere. They take time. I mean, CapEx sometimes takes 5-10 years to pay off, and fiat really incentivizes us to think short term. And we see our business leaders thinking short term. Everything is about, taking on debt, adding leverage, and trying to get like the most profit in the shortest amount of time so that you can present the healthiest, numbers, so to speak. And that, again, it's just like, it's not about growth. It's not about investing in the company or producing better products. It's like, oh, maybe let's buy back shares of stock so we can, puff the stock price up, and the executive compensation packages are very healthy at that point, but it's like it's not real growth. And so the only solution I think is to move to a system that is built on something that no one can manipulate, that is absolutely scarce and finite, that reorders our system so that we can actually trust the base layer, the prices once again. Because right now it's like, well, the price of the house has gone up, but it doesn't reflect the value of the house. It reflects how badly the dollars have been debased.
They make it so easy, and when I say they, sort of just like the financial system we live in makes it so easy to ruin yourself financially, but it's so hard to prosper. I have
Yeah.
a friend and we all probably have friends who have gotten themselves into insane amounts of credit card debt, and he it was bad, and he finally made the decision he was going to work to pay it off, and he had to work like get off work at 5 and he would Uber from 5 p.m. to midnight and just living on rice and ground beef for like 10 months and eventually got it paid off. But like it took so much when the credit is just sort of handed out so easily.
Yeah. Yeah, but I respect someone that's actually going to make the sacrifice to pay things back, because I think that so many people they're going further and further into debt. And what I am also grateful to Bitcoin for is it really gave me a sense of empowerment and ownership and responsibility that I think I never had before. Whereas when you don't understand and you're not empowered with the knowledge of how the system works, I feel like it's very easy to just blame everything else, right? It's not me and I'm the victim of this whole thing and I'm oppressed and like it's this guy's fault or that guy's fault, and I'm going to maybe like express that feeling through politics or something. But actually taking ownership and really educating yourself, especially now that with the internet provides all this information for free, essentially you just have to take the time, empowering yourself so that you can take the steps to get out of maybe a situation that's not so financially great. Like anyone can do it. It's about, do you want to do it? And are you willing to take the time and do something that isn't very easy, which is like really learn and study something? And I admire people that are able to do that, because the easy way is just to blame other people or get really negative about the future, negative about your surroundings, and think nothing's ever going to change. Like anyone is capable of taking action. And I do really, really believe that. And I think that Bitcoin actually encourages you to do that and think in that way because it's such a meritocratic technology.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So you spent a lot of time Bitcoin advocacy, Bitcoin education, and you covered a lot of things as a journalist and reporter prior to this. What are some of the main topics that interest you outside of Bitcoin?
Well, when I was a reporter, I mostly covered the investigative beat, and I was really drawn to stories about uncovering corruption. Well, actually, I mean, just in the last week, if you can believe it, an investigation that I helped break in my local news market back in like 2015. So this is 10 years ago. It helped me earn my first investigative Emmy nomination. I exposed a public corruption scandal involving a mayor and a real estate developer. And 10 years later, that mayor was finally, he finally pled guilty to all these corruption charges. So he was indicted on 33 counts, and a very similar story repeated itself when I was in Los Angeles. And so for me, I think because of what my parents went through in the great financial crisis and losing everything, I just wanted to hold the powerful accountable. And what's so funny is Bitcoin holds the powerful accountable. So I think it will actually empower journalists to do their job a little bit better, because I've actually seen my news industry get corrupted a bit, and they haven't been the watchdogs and the true investigators that I think they could have been, and they've been largely influenced by one political party or another. And I think Bitcoin can help fix that. So for me, I always loved investigative. That was like my beat that I really leaned into. But outside of Bitcoin or reporting, my passions are, I would say, I love travel and cultures. I always loved watching Anthony Bourdain and Samantha Brown and Rick Steves. I love like travel shows. And I love everything about Italy because I used to live there, and I love cooking. I love learning about food and wines. I have lots of passions outside of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin does take up a lot of my time.
Yeah. So how long did you live in Italy for? That's pretty cool. I just went for the first time last summer, and it was I only got to go for two
Oh,
days. It wasn't long enough, but
I'm obsessed. I'm a little obsessed with Italy. I first went there. I was going to study abroad for just a year, and I ended up petitioning basically for me to be allowed to stay there longer. So I ended up there 4 semesters, so the equivalent of basically 2 years of college. And I created the Italian major at Pepperdine University. So I was the first student to graduate with it. I was the president of Ciao Club there. I was very passionate about Italy, so I graduated with journalism and Italian studies, and I've gone back to Italy almost every year since. I thought about moving there at one point, and I love it. I love Italy.
yeah. Do you speak Italian?
I do. Yeah. Not as well as when I worked there and lived there, but I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So have you gone like pretty much
Yes.
all over the country?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I've gone north, south. I really love studying Italian history and culture and Italian cinema and Italian food, gastronomy. Italy is so unique because a lot of people don't appreciate that it's actually a relatively young country in the sense that it really was 20 different regions that eventually became sort of centralized under one government. And each region is so unique. It's so unique. It has its own pasta, it has its own dialect, it has its own just cultural differences that make it so special. So, one of my favorite things is when you go to Italy, I mean, depending on where you go, you're going to a completely different part of like you're experiencing something very, very unique. And South Italy is very different from North Italy, and Sicily is so rugged and just I just love it. I mean, I could sit and talk about Italy for forever. And what's cool is when I started studying Bitcoin, you learn about the Florentine and you learn about like the gold standard that really ushered in the Renaissance. And we talk about how Bitcoin will usher in this digital renaissance and a new time where prosperity and abundance will thrive and spread. And I really liked studying like the Medicis and like the history of the Florentine dynasty. So yeah, it's really fun.
That is awesome. Yeah. So my great grandfather's from Italy. He immigrated from Campobasso to Argentina,
Oh wow.
and he went on
Yeah.
a boat too before World War One, I think.
Wow.
And if you listen to Argentines, the way they speak Spanish, they pretty much sound like Italians
Yeah.
speaking Spanish.
Yeah, there are so many Italians that went to Argentina. Yeah.
And if you hear two Argentines arguing, you might actually think they're from Italy. And so when I'm speaking with my dad, people are like, "Man, you guys Italian?" And like, we are Italian from
Wow.
Argentina. And when I spent some time in Spain at like a study abroad thing, I was hanging out with these Italians, and they had trouble. When they'd go to Colombia, they'd go to Chile, they'd go to Bolivia, and they had a hard time understanding the Spanish. But as soon
Mm.
as they got to Argentina, for some
Oh,
reason, just
yeah.
like the cadence, the way they speak, they just understood perfectly.
Yeah, the Italian, the different dialects can all sound so different. I mean, I don't understand Sicilian at all. It's very
Really.
difficult. It's very challenging for me, but I like the Italian language was actually born in Tuscany. And if you read like Dante Alighieri, like all of that, I mean, the history is so, so rich there. So I was based kind of in the heart of all of that. But today, the Tuscan dialect, it's unique and you can recognize it right away. Like I could recognize if someone was from Florence because they don't pronounce their C's like a
Right.
hard C. They pronounce it like an H. So if you're in Florence and you ask for a Coca-Cola, you say Coca-Cola. And
Wow.
like yeah, so it's not Toscana, it's Toscana. And like you can recognize the differences and I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah, you mentioned the the Renaissance,
Hmm.
and it sent me on a rabbit trail just when I was researching Italy one time. For 500 years in Venice, a loaf of bread cost the same amount of gold. I can't remember exactly what time period it was, but it was during that time you were describing where they were all sort of like city autonomous
Hmm.
regions. But
The city
for
state there.
500 years, a loaf of bread was however much gold. That's
Hmm.
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and it tells you something about the gold standard and why there was so much flourishing under it. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because the guys talk about how it's like a meme, right? That men always think about Rome. Like I think about
Yeah.
Italy and Rome too. So I guess I'm part of that. But it is such a fascinating time to study because that empire, the Roman Empire, lasted for so 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 long, and what allowed it to ultimately crumble, it was
Mm.
largely monetary reasons.
Yeah. Um, I think anytime you go back to the wisdom of the past, which really was what the Renaissance was. Like, I think the motto was ad fontes, which was back to the sources. And so there was people going back to classical literature, going back to classical art, and
Hmm.
just sound arguments, sound principles. And you just saw this flourishing of culture,
Yeah.
arts, uh, and
Yeah.
really fascinating. Real quick, last question on Italy is, where do you think you get the best pizza in Italy?
That's really tough. I mean, if you haven't had Neapolitan pizza, you've got to try it. I'm not the biggest fan of visiting Naples. It's not my favorite, but the pizza there is second to none. It's so incredible. But I mean, I'm so partial to Florence. I love Florence, and I think the pasta and pizza is the best there.
Okay, I'll have to keep that in mind because next time I go. So you mentioned that you are coming out with a book.
Mhm.
Who is the audience you had in mind when you were writing this book?
So I really wanted to write a book for the everyday person, for your mom, for your sister, for your grandma, for your friend that doesn't have a lot of time because they're super busy with whatever they're doing with work. Someone who doesn't have like an expertise in finance or engineering. I just think that there are so many wonderful books out there, but maybe one is a little bit too academic, maybe one's a little bit too technical, but they have great aspects to all of them, and I wanted to draw from each of those and share the message of Bitcoin in a very, very approachable way to the everyday person that is just busy and caught up in their lives. And I wanted to also present it in a very neutral way because one of the things that I have been so disappointed to see is how we have been drawn into these political just negative debates so much, whereas where I think we're again focusing on the symptoms and maybe like ad hominem attacks as opposed to really focusing in on the problem and how we can actually solve this and be collaborative and bring out the best in one another. And it's made me so sad to see that like people can't even be friends anymore if they voted for, someone that the other one disagrees with. That's so crazy to me, and it's so backwards to just like a civilized society. I mean, we can disagree, we can chat with each other about why each of us see things differently and maybe come to the middle on some aspects of the issue. But why would I disown someone or say that I can't be friends with someone because they just voted for a different person who, by the way, I mean, look at the track record. Both parties are racking up the debt. Both sides have contributed to the deteriorating quality of life for the average person. So it's just silly to me. It's like so weird. So I wish that we could just get back to the middle. And that's what I aim to do with my book is present Bitcoin in a way that's approachable to everyone, no matter where you sit on the political spectrum, no matter your age, no matter what country you're from. Like it really talks to just the heart of people and like why we have our problem and why Bitcoin's the best solution.
What was the book writing process like? I've heard people say that writing a book can be just very, very difficult for so many reasons. And so, but now like there's a lot more resources than there were 10, 20 years ago. And so what was that process like?
I mean, it was a wonderful process. First of all, it is very, very time consuming because you end up feeling like, you're just pouring your heart and soul into this and it becomes your baby. I was very, very fortunate because I have an amazing literary agent. And I also have an amazing collaborator that I really needed to learn from because I have written for the past 10 plus years in my career for the ear and for the eye. And writing television scripts is very, very different than writing for the page. And so I really needed to kind of tweak my writing. And I had help from this amazing woman named Allison Gustafson. And so she really helped tweak my writing in a way that fits the page. And so I really appreciate all that I've learned from her. And it's been an amazing process. I do not or I recommend that people, if they're going to write a book, just make sure you have a lot of time because it's a lot of late nights and early mornings and weekends of just you don't know when a thought's going to come to you, right? It's just like all of a sudden you're hit with inspiration and then you got to write it down on a napkin or on your phone notes or somewhere. But it's a great process, and it's just it's always hard to give something away that's going to be judged, and people might not understand it in the way that maybe you hope that they will, but like I've given it my all, and I'm so grateful, and a couple of very prominent people have already read it and given their blessing on it, and so I'm excited to finally release it.
Yeah, that's cool. What you said earlier, it's happened to me so many times where maybe you're just waking up and getting out of bed, and you have this idea, and then if you didn't write it down by like 10
Yeah.
a.m., like you
Then
forget
it's
the
gone. You
idea.
forget. Yeah. I had that happen to me a few times and I really kicked myself because I come up with something really great and a way to phrase it and then I forget about it.
So when does that come out?
So right now it's scheduled for November release. Yeah, but it's available for pre-order. So if you go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of the book sites, it's called Bitcoin is for Everyone.
Sweet. So you have interviewed um, some of the biggest people in Bitcoin. Is there one moment or that kind of sticks out to you from all the interviews you've done?
Oh gosh, that's really tough because now I've done hundreds of interviews at this point. I think the way I'll answer this is that the original first few interviews mean so much to me now because when I started my journey, I was learning from all of the people that I ended up interviewing and I was so fascinated not just by Bitcoin but also by the people in the space because I found them to be so diverse and so talented and intelligent in whatever area they came to Bitcoin from. I just found it to be such an inspiring place in terms of how much knowledge and how much experience there was in different industries and different sectors. I mean, people who are geniuses in like computer science or programming, engineering, and then people who have been so successful on the corporate side and in finance or hedge funds or Wall Street. It brought together just this really interesting group of people. And so I never intended, I was working as a reporter. So I was just doing the podcast as a hobby. And I thought, I would just love to interview like maybe like the 12 or 15 biggest Bitcoiners, and that'll be that. And my focus will be more on who they are as people and why they believe so much in Bitcoin and how they got to that point and like what they think about Bitcoin. And so if you go back to like those first interviews, you will find these hidden gems, these evergreen stories where, Lynn Alden and Jeff Booth and Preston Pish and Michael Saylor and all of these big names, we start at the beginning with every interview. I'm like, where did you grow up? What did you want to be when you grew up? And it's just a very human side to all these people that really I could listen to any of those interviews. Like I don't like watching myself, but I like watching the people, give these really fascinating backstories of how they got to be where they are and how they got to discover Bitcoin. And so I recommend people listen to those.
Yeah, for sure. That's really cool. Just how, it's cool that today we have the technology where you can really just record journeys like that and
Yeah.
not depend on having
And
to.
spoken by themselves, it's not someone else sharing their life story. It's like from their own experiences. And it's just, yeah, I love those interviews.
The last couple questions here. BTC in DC is later this year, into September. It's the first one. You're going to be speaking there.
Yeah.
It's one of the conferences I'm really tempted to travel all the way there to, and it just seems like it'll be really cool. I used to live in the DC area, and it's an excuse to go back. What can you tell us about that conference? And are
Yeah,
you
so
like?
I think the plans are underway. The organizers from BTC Prague, which has become really one of the largest Bitcoin conferences in the world, it's in Europe, they're going to be lending their expertise in event planning to BTC in DC. So I'm really excited. I don't know the full program yet, but I know it's going to bring together, a lot of the people that are close to the industry that are educating policymakers and regulators, that are people that are actually in these agencies that are making some of these big decisions that impact all of us in the markets. So they're all going to be there. So I'm excited. DC is a very special place. I never thought that it would embrace Bitcoin in the way that it has so early, because we are still very, very early in the Bitcoin journey. And here we are, we have a Bitcoin president and the highest office basically saying, hey, don't sell your Bitcoin. So that's really, really incredible. But I've always loved DC. I actually finished grad school there and I thought it was a fascinating place. I was a reporter there covering national security. So yeah, it's going to be fun. I hope everyone comes out.
Have you ever tried? So this is a total side question. Peruvian chicken. It's like a really popular thing over there in the DC
No,
area. Well, maybe in October you can.
I'll have to try.
There's a
Yeah.
place called Sardi's. Because there's a big Peruvian immigrant population there, and they've opened up a ton of Peruvian chicken restaurants. But it is like the best
Uh,
food on the planet. It is amazing.
awesome. No, I'll have to go check it out because I do like Peruvian food.
Yeah. So I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on this show. I'm always really just amazed at the support that people in this space sort of give each other. And I've just been blown away time and time again. But like my last question I wanted to ask you is, why did you agree to come on my humble podcast? Because I don't really have that many followers and it's a growing podcast. And so I'm just curious.
Well, I was there too once, and I didn't have a lot of followers, and I was asking a lot of the people that I had learned from if they would humbly go on my show. And I just think that it's just really important to give back and to take the time. I mean, you never know who you're going to reach. With any interview that you do, I think each one is a really unique opportunity to reach a new audience and help someone better understand Bitcoin. And so I'm just a big believer in that. And I also just think we need to help each other more. Like a lot of people are very competitive, and competition's good, but like it's also, I mean, the more the merrier in Bitcoin, right? I mean, it's all accretive. Like I love that Bitcoin it's for your friends and for your frenemies. It's for everyone. And I don't know. I'm a big believer in giving back, and I've met a lot of givers, and people have given freely to me. And it's funny. I went to Pepperdine for my undergrad, and the motto of Pepperdine, which came from George Pepperdine, who created it, was "Freely ye receive, freely give." And so, whenever you get something, like you should turn around and give back. And I think that people are most fulfilled when they're of service to others. So, I'm happy to come on your show, and thank you for asking me because it means a lot to me.
Well, thank you so much, and I'll tell my sister-in-law to say hi to you if she gets to run into
Yes,
you at the Bitcoin Women's Brunch, which I know
thank
she's
you.
really looking forward to that. And
Yeah, you guys, 500 women sold out. Next time we have to like open it up to, I don't know, 1,000 people. We have 200 on a wait list. I mean, it's crazy. I'm so excited.
yeah, that is really cool. I mean, there's 30,000 people total taking over the city of Vegas, and then at your event, you got it's a women's event, which is really cool, and so
So
sold out. That's
excited.
amazing.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. See you next time.